Hey AGA folks, I'm Chris Garlock, managing editor of the American Go Association's e-journal, joined once again by Michael Redmond, 9Dan professional. Today, Michael is going to review another AlphaGo master self-play game. And as always, before we get started, I want to thank all of our AGA members. And if you'd like to support this content as well, please consider joining the American Go Association at usgo.org. So, Michael, we're back to Master. So, are we in for another marathon here? Is that the deal?
Yeah, it's going to be a tough game.
I just need to know. I've got just the one Guinness, so it may be a 2 or 3. I'm thinking. You've just got tea because it's morning where you are, right?
Yeah, it's morning here. So I'm okay.
All right.
I have the energy.
All right. So what's the overview on this game? We're up to, I think, is this 8 or 9? I think
It's game 9 of the self-played series.
Okay.
And it's going to start with a big fight on the right side of the board, and you won't be sure which side is attacking and which side is defending. Really, it's sort of complicated. And about a quarter of the board each is going to die. And then I'll tell you what the score is. Yeah.
Oh, this is going to be one of those.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Is there going to be a quiz? I guess, should I start paying attention now, or can I wait?
We'll see how it turns out. I don't have any plans about that. Okay. So actually, this is the second time we're going to see this opening because this is up to this point, this is pretty common in the self-played games. It's like a position where black can continue with the Chinese, the mini Chinese opening, and it can do both of them actually. It can do, let's just put them on like that. It can do this one, or it can do this one, and it also does the game move. I think it's about three moves that it likes to play, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the second game in which it's played this high shimari. But this gets interesting because when black does this, what master does with white, and we've seen this, let's see, I think it was game number 5 or something. I'd have to check. White plays one kakari and then attaches here. So this is the second time. This is the second time we've seen that. And what's happening here is in the other game that we saw, black played down.
Right.
This was pretty early in the series, if I recall correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And white played this, and white sort of outspeeded black in the opening, like getting this big moyo on the left side of the board. And I had the feeling that white was way ahead, and it turned into a super close game.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the way it turned out that time. And when humans play this move, the attachment here, usually humans are a bit hesitant to play this move because it looks just a little bit submissive.
Right.
But actually, the attachment itself has become strangely popular because although it's one of the moves that is hard to understand, it works to a certain extent. And being able to play an attachment smack against your opponent's shimari at the moment it plays, it's sort of fun for pros too, I guess. And it's become pretty popular. So in this game, black played a hane on top, which is probably the more normal way for black to play. It's an aggressive move in an area where black has extra stones. So that makes sense. Like in an area where black has this shimari, black should be able to play aggressively. And white plays the hane underneath. Now this is a sort of mandatory. This is a very important move. I didn't even put the variation in, but if white pulls back like this would just be a heavy shape. It wouldn't be very good for white. So white plays the hane here. And the idea is if black actually, no, this is the one that was the variation of the other game maybe. Let's see. No, it's not. I was right the first time. I shouldn't have said that. This is what happens if black plays an Atari right now. Black has an option to play an Atari now and close white into the corner. So this is actually a feasible way for black to play, depending on the position. But you can see that that kakari in the upper right corner sort of set this up for white because now white's going to play an extension.
Right.
And this is working well to reduce the value of black's wall. And so white has this cut at D that white's looking at. And of course, the invasion is on the lower side, or B and C. So white has some potential here to attack the black wall later on. So what I was saying in the commentary with all these markers on the board is that white will probably start with an invasion at B or C, and will use D as the secondary attack.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so this is probably not so satisfying for black when white is getting all the territory and has potential to attack also. So so black connects. So this, I agree with this. And white extends, and black plays an Atari. And again, like if black did this, it would be pretty similar to what I just showed you. It would be the same thing, only a different order of moves. So it's the same story. So black covers on the corner, and white crawls. And this is where black played the pincer, which is a very big move. It's an extension of the pincer at the same time. But in looking at the game, I finally decided, and this was less intuitive and more actually sort of diagnosing what happened after this. I decided that black should play one extension here.
I was going to ask about that.
And then play the extension. Now this exchange, it's not so good in a way because it allows white to settle that group. But as it turns out in the game, white's going to immediately play this sequence here. And now the black stone in the lower left, that kakari that black played earlier, is looking pretty bad. It's a bad exchange for the white move on the left there. So in this position, white has potential to attack black on the lower side. And I don't like it for black. And the future of the game is gradually looking difficult for black because of that. So I'm going to say that black sort of settled the position with that move by playing this extension. And in this case, since black is on top of white like that, it's very difficult for white to get an effective attack against the marked stone. In fact, sometimes black will just sacrifice that stone by playing moves from above. Like if white, just to continue, if white plays something like this, black would continue with something on the top maybe. And the expansion of black's moyo towards the center would be more important than anything white could get on the lower side.
Right.
So this would be good for black. I like this better for black. White would not be playing that way maybe. White would probably go directly to the right side. But I like having black play this exchange of A for B.
And it's absolute Sente.
It's absolute Sente. There's no way white can play away. White might crawl, but it's usual for white to play the jump at B.
Right.
So black plays there, and white gets this shape here. And I thought maybe let's look at this variation. There's this variation where if black plays on the upper side, it's going to be miai with white making a life on the upper side. And I sort of like this one better because black has a moyo on the upper side and it's sort of joined with black's potential on the right side. And the point of this variation is that black has black has emphasized the upper side and slightly de-emphasized the right side because that territory is now open on the side underneath. And so it's not as important. And it's good for black to sort of de-emphasize the right side because the right side has a lot of bad aji anyway. So it's very difficult for black to make that into a territory. And it will be easier for black to build on the upper side. So I like the direction of play for black in this variation. So that's, I'll say that is what I would play.
Okay.
But in the actual game, black jumped into the 3-3 point.
I mean, in some ways, not surprising, but it looks a little odd, right?
Well, I pretty regularly dislike the 3-3 point invasion, and I don't really like it in this case. But even when black does this, it usually leads to an even game. So like when your opponent or you play a 3-3 point invasion, you can't expect it to radically change the status of the game, like the overall position. It's probably going to be a pretty even position after this if you started with an even position. So I agree with AlphaGo in that this is not necessarily a bad move, and it's an even local result.
You just don't like it.
I just don't like it, yeah. And so black plays here to attack the stone at B. And now it gets exciting. So this is a point of the game where black has a lot of influence towards the right, and white has some potential on the left side of the board. But if both sides continue just surrounding territory, black's right side is probably going to be bigger. So it's a good time for white to be invading the right side. And AlphaGo always does this, does it with a pretty aggressive style. But this is a point where I probably added something in the commentary, the SDF commentary too. But this is a point where it's important to be able to evaluate. And AlphaGo is very different in the way it evaluates these positions, because in looking at this game, I found that it's already viewing this black wall in the lower right as a group that can potentially be attacked. And we're going to see that happen. We're going to see the process in which that works. But white has, for the first thing, white has this forcing move against the black wall. And so this is a peep that threatens to push through at A. And also, after black answers that, in the game, black is going to answer that here. This position, if we isolate it, it is not 100% alive. Like white can play first, and it's not going to be a completely alive position. It takes a lot of doing for white to get to that point, but we're going to see white approach that. Actually, if I were black, I would be tempted to play the fighting spirit move here and ignore white. White would be able to cut here. Black would probably put this cut in, and after black plays here,
whoa.
Well, black has to do something. Otherwise, white would just win semi-I. After black plays here, this black group is not yet alive. It's not yet alive. But any fight to capture, any semi-I that might happen immediately is going to be good for black. So white's going to move out. And this is where I stopped, because all sorts of things could happen now. But it's really hard to say, to evaluate this. I'd say it's about an even fight.
Wow.
So this is something that I would be willing to try in a game, and it would be very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
But dangerous for both sides, of course.
Right. Right.
So this would be what I would call an even fight. But of course, maybe AlphaGo didn't like that, and it played the more conservative move. And white plays down. And so this again is a good move in that white is making full use of the marked stone, and it's a position where pulling back on the third line would maybe be not so good shape. White would still have cramped shape if white wanted to make a life. And the value of this move is that white is going to get more eye space because it's on the second line to start with. And also black has to cover here to cut that white stone off, which means white's going to get to put a cut in too.
Right.
So this gives white a lot more momentum, even when white tries to run out into the center, which of course is going to happen. And so white is sort of planning to sacrifice those mark stones for the time being. It didn't really, like it's going to hang on to those stones too, but in a general idea is that white is probably willing to sacrifice the mark stones, while this group on the right is already the main group. And you can see that that black group is now looking like that black group in the lower right corner has only a small space in the lower right corner, which is actually a shape that can be made into Smigel problems, life and death problems. So this is actually a kind of a basic life and death shape. Maybe I should make a diagram for that.
Yeah, I love.
So like at this point, let's just go back a few moves and say this is a point where black could have played push once here. And this is a forcing move that works right now. But white would probably answer it with this, which gives white superior eye space. Like this just gives white a living shape. And so the point is that if black does play the push, the value of this push is that it encloses white. It makes it more difficult for white to get out into the center. And the demerit, the trade-off is that white gets to live with 100% living shape now. Like white has two eyes now. And black has to answer there, so white gets to run away in that side too. Just, you were making a sort of scrutinizing the shape. So I'll add some moves just to show you that it is, after all, alive, like just locally. White would probably play this kind of squeeze too, but white does have two eyes.
Nice. Very nice.
So to get back to the game, So black just simply curled around. So now if white does, for instance, if white does something like this, black is not going to play this move. That would just make it easy for white to give eyes. So by playing here immediately, it's more difficult for white to make 2 eyes on the side. And the trade-off for that is now white gets to move out into the center, in a position where you would usually expect white to play at A. And it looks like this knight's move that white just played is sort of weakening the connection. And what I'm talking about here is going to come up fairly soon.
Yeah.
For instance, I made a variation for this move. Like black can push here.
Right.
And push through here. It looks like white's in trouble, right?
It does. I was just reading that. Does not look.
It's going to be a ko.
Oh.
And the point here is that white can afford to sacrifice the right side if it's just this low side territory and get something in the territory. So black has to answer this. And white's going to take the ko. And first of all, when this happens, that black group in the corner has become very weak. Like it's going to be very troublesome if white gets to win the ko, because white will have 100% living shape, and black is not quite alive in the corner.
Right.
Also, I've marked a B. Why don't I just add some moves for that, just to make it more clear? If black plays here, white's going to play a hane in the center. And so this is a kind of it's still a ko position, but like playing moves like this would still not help the corner. So this is a position where white can be happy with just playing extra moves in the center and sort of squeezing black, because black is that side territory on the right side is really being pressed down a great deal.
Right.
And white has a lot of potential in the center. So this would be just very good for white. And so black extends. And so black can't really go after those 2 stones. It's very frustrating. It would be very frustrating for black because the corners group is not very strong. And so I was showing you a ko. Actually, this move is setting up a way to capture those 2 stones without a ko. And I'm going to make a variation for that too, because white has to connect here. And so black can, for instance, push through here and then cut on the 4th line and capture without a ko. So you might think that's good, but it's not good either, because the corner is dead now.
Right.
And with those marked white stones in the center, it's going to be very difficult for black to get out in the center. Yeah. And so that's just capturing those 3 stones on the white, those white 3 stones, they're cutting stones, so they should be really important, but it's just not working for black in this position where the lower right corner is not alive. So that's making this whole thing very efficient for white. So the lower right corner is sort of, even as it stands. Oh, I was going to show you how it can die in its middle position. Mm-hmm. And we'll just assume that there are no extra weaknesses in the white position, which is not really true in this position, but we'll just assume that. The tsumego tesuji, the life and death tesuji, is to play 1 hane and then play this placement on the 2-2 point, and this is a dead shape.
Wow.
And in the life and death problem, the bad answer would be to play this first and then play here, in which case black gets to jump here, which is a nice tesuji, which threatens the cut. After white takes the other eye, black gets to cut here. And the point is, if white answers that, then now the 2 stones in the corners cannot connect up. So if we go back to the correct variation, which is, not that one, it's the one where white plays the hane first. If we go back to this one, obviously jumping now would not be enough space. So black covers, and now white has the potential. If black continues like this, white has that potential connection on the first line. Mm-hmm. And so there's a big difference in the order of moves here. So it's a kind of a basic life and death problem that you will find in a lot of life and death books and stuff.
Yeah, it's clever. There's a lot of tesujis. They're cool tesujis.
It's stuff that will help you in an actual game.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not 100% alive, but for the time being, black is leaving it, because there's an issue in that variation. I was not talking about the fact that black has this forcing move here. which sort of changes the equation and it's going to make it a ko. So it's not going to die outright. It's going to be a ko in the lower right corner. So for the time being, black just maps out this huge territory in the center. I mean, in the upper right, I should say.
Right.
And black's being a little bit ambitious because the hane here in the center is also a huge move. So that's why black is playing so far away from the black wall. Black is playing further away towards the upper side, because when white does do that, black's going to hane against it. And now that black stone, I might as well mark it. This black stone is fairly well placed. So black doesn't want that to be too close to the black wall. But of course, when black goes so far away, you can probably guess what white's going to do. White's going to jump in.
I did guess that. I would have done it, but I would have felt bad about it.
And if black is defensive here, then it's going to get fairly small. Now white can play the hane here.
Right.
And it's those two stones that white has played in between there are sort of getting in the way, and white can afford to sacrifice them if white can get a kind of an ideal wall towards the left side. Because if white does end up surrounding the left side, that's going to be huge. It's like, is that the 8th line white's just played on if we're looking from the left side? So that's a lot of territory white can make it.
Wow.
So black jumps out. So every move here, they're sort of like what humans would call fighting spirit moves, but they're logical too. When I'm talking about AlphaGo's games, I always try to find a logical answer. And so black is attacking white here, and white plays on the right side. So this is a move that it's sort of it's interesting. It's not.
I don't get it. It seems like he just played all these moves around that white group, looking like he was thinking about making it live, and then he just sort of abandons it.
Well, I think AlphaGo thinks that this white group is going to be okay. You're talking about the other white group, right?
The one that has no eyes.
One that has no eyes, yeah. I think it's going to be a really difficult problem. Like, I could go into that for hours and I wouldn't be sure of it. But there is some forcing moves white has towards the center, which are going to come into play later in my commentary.
All right.
White has all sorts of stuff. And for the time being, this black group in the corner, next time, like if white had played, let's go into that variation where I was saying that black is going to die. Let's go into it again, because actually black can play something like this, and we have a ko here. So it's going to be a ko actually. And so looking overall, it's really white that has to worry about that group on the upper side. So white, it's not a overall position where white can hope to succeed with this ko. So what white is doing with this move is basically white is saying, go ahead and make life. But it's going to be painful. Because if black wants to make a life, the life and death answer, again, the tsumebo answer, would be to play here.
Right.
Like if you're doing a go problem, this would give you the right answer. It would be correct.
Yeah.
But it's really painful, because like it's 3 points of black territory, and white getting this move that I just passed by, this move here, it increases white's territory on the lower side. It gives some extra safety for that group, and also white's going to be able to force with this stuff, which gives white a life on the right side too. So all of white's groups are getting extra territory and making extra eyes, while black is just getting 3 points. So it's really painful.
Right.
So black didn't do that actually. So you could say that this move is a kind of this move is a kind of a probe, asking black if black is going to go to that extent to live without a ko. Because what black did was black said, go ahead and make the ko. So there's a ko pending in the lower right corner now. And white doesn't do it immediately, but the ko, of course, is if white plays here and then here, it's going to be a ko in the corner because black has to cut. And so this is another ko. But again, it's pretty damaging to white when black wins that ko also, because that group on the lower side
Right.
Just have some random co-thread. This white group on the lower side is now, it's not alive anymore. And so that will change the status of white's lower side group, and it's going to be pretty huge in territory too. Black's game, that is. So it's a code that white has to be very careful of when to play. But white does have that potential ko in the corner. And it's going to happen. So like at this point, I'm going to be giving you variations for just about every move. Because it's a very tricky sequence. Like white plays here. And this is, I guess this move is pretty straightforward. But then black counterattacks with this. So there's a lot of...
I've been looking at that ever since he played away, because it just looks like the vital point, right?
It's a vital point. Well, first of all, let's say what happens if black plays here. I think white's going to play this exchange. And this exchange in the center is a way that white can make some extra eye space. Because when white does this, you can see the outside wall was sort of weak. That's why black had to add this stone to stop white from pushing through and cutting. And white, by playing this forcing move, white's getting an eye in the center there. And it looks pretty much alive now. And actually that exchange of A for C, in a way it's sort of fixing white's shape. And that's why black didn't start there. But this exchange that I've just showed you in the center, giving white some eye space at this point, is one of the reasons that white was pretty confident about making a life for this group. And also you can see black has to worry about the black groups too. So it's a pretty urgent for black to counterattack first. But then it's not so clear exactly how this is working. So I made a variation for that. For instance, if white just straightforwardly answers, this seems to be natural, right? Mm-hmm. And black's going to play a Hana here and play the Tari. And you see the reason black was not answering white on the upper side was because at this point, it's actually possible for black to do this. And the three stones there are connected up somewhere. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so white will play this way and capture the one stone. But in the process, white has lost a lot of eye shape. Like even, so when white starts with A, this sequence to B is actually taking away white's eye shape. And black is starting to fix the outside wall too. Mm. So this is how black is planning to scoop out white's eyes. And so black does that, and white just cannot really afford to answer it directly. So white plays here. And the idea with this is the game move. So black, it looks like they're sort of ignoring each other, but actually if black answers white here, that's going to change. Now it's going to change what happens in the center, because white's going to start with this stuff. And now the upper side, black group is in trouble. So now black has to worry about, white has a kind of a connection at D and a push at C. So there's all sorts of trouble with those three black stones there and in the center. So by continuing on the upper side, white is threatening that kind of stuff. And so that's what happens when black tries to continue to attack white, when white does this. And so what black did was black played here. And for the time being, black is sort of looking at this weak point here. So this is sort of, and by looking at the attachment here, which sort of cuts white off, black is forestalling that attack that I was just showing you.
Right.
And so white just switches the upper side, and we're getting a trade here. And so it's fairly peacefully ended with white living on the upper side and black getting all those marked stones, which locally it's a very big gain for black.
Yeah.
But you should remember that exchange in the lower right corner that white played early on. I didn't want to mark it just then because I had a lot of marks on the board, but this exchange here on the right side where white was asking how black wanted to live. The fact that black answered that in a way that leaves a ko means that just to go back to this position, by sacrificing all of these marked stones, white has created a whole bunch of ko threats. And so now the ko is really difficult for black to live, to win. And so that's what white was doing in throwing away all these stones.
Wow.
And so that's why this marked exchange was probably, the timing of it was probably very important, because if black had answered in the other way, maybe white would have just tried to live more solidly in the center and saved all those stones. But because black answered this way and left that ko in the lower right corner, it made it worthwhile for white to sacrifice all of those stones in the center. And it looks like white's trying to connect, but that's not really what white's doing. So we'll see that happening. Black plays these forcing moves against the upper side, and this cuts off white in the center. So all of those stones that I marked earlier, they're dead. And white plays one hane, sort of feinting to show that white's going to play the ko next, a kind of a warning to black, because now white plays here. Now this is a really tricky move, because it doesn't work.
You're loving this, aren't you? You're just like.
It's a really tricky move. It keeps me on my toes.
Yeah.
First of all, locally it doesn't work, but if black cuts here, it's going to create a huge amount of big ko threats. Like white's going to start the ko, and white's going to have all these ko threats in the center, starting with B, and then if white plays B as a ko threat, black's going to have to answer that on the left, and then white's going to have C as a ko threat. And as I told you, it doesn't work locally, but it's going to create a whole bunch of ko threats. So there's no way black's going to win this ko. It's not really a ko win. White's going to be answering most of black's ko threats anyway. White has an abundance of ko threats, so it's going to be very easy for white to win this ko. So when white plays here, although black could have cut, black backs away.
Wow.
So this is really strange. So black's saying, go ahead and save half of your group. And if white cannot play the ko at C, then I guess that's feasible. And my idea with white was I would say if I was the white player, after getting this profit here, black's backed away, right? So white's gained some points. Maybe I don't have to play the ko, because that ko at C, which white did play here, it's a really scary ko for white too, because white cannot really afford to lose this ko. White has to win it. So I would want to play away. I would suggest playing one hane here and then extension on the side, letting black live. If black adds a stone there, white can play here. And this looks okay. It looks like it's an undecided game too. And the actual game wasn't bad for white either. So I guess you could say it's a choice of taste or how you like to play. But it makes more sense for me for white to be avoiding the ko when black has reduced the number of white's ko threats at a price. Black has given white some profit in return for reducing white's ko threats. And in the actual game, that becomes a really good move for black, because white's going to play the ko. But it turns out either way you play it, it's going to be a close game. It's not decisive. So the ko starts. And white has this ko threat. It looks sort of strange, white playing a ko threat on a group that's already alive. But the idea here is that if black finishes the ko, white will extend once, and black has to answer on the side. Black needs, basically, black needs these two moves, this move and one more move, or two moves in some form to make a life on the side. And because cutting was not an option, like if black had cut here, this would just be bad for black. Black would die.
Wow, yeah.
So black needs these two moves, and white will have saved those stones in the center with Sente. So in this case, white's getting a lot of extra profit in the corner with A, and black's squeezed into a relatively small life, and those marked stones have connected up with Sente. So this makes up for the profit that black got in the lower right corner. So this would be good for white.
Wow.
And so black answers that ko threat. But now, of course, white only has a limited number of ko threats, so it's okay for black to answer that. And now white is, still playing ko threats there. And this is white's final ko threat. And this is another trade. If black finishes the ko, white's going to play here. And like it's the upper right corner is alive already for black. So this would actually be less effective than the ko threat I was talking about before. But also, I might as well mark it now. This exchange here that was played as a ko threat for black. This was really bad for black because now white's relatively safe on the lower side. It would have been better for black not to have that exchange when black wins the ko. And so it's slightly less effective for white in the upper right compared to the other diagram. I might as well flash back to it. I think it's this one. Yeah, this one. Compared to this diagram, this one is slightly less effective for both players. Like white has ended up with gote. Oh, I jumped ahead of myself. White has ended up with gote in the upper right. But black has also played a bad exchange. The marked exchange is bad for black, but black had to play it as a ko threat. So it's still about even, and I'm going to say that it's okay for white because white can play this in this joseki, this 3-3-point joseki that is very popular now. This hane and the hanging connection here is a move that white will often use to settle the wall because this wall, since players are playing that 3-3 invasion when there's no extension on the side, they're just playing it smack from the start of the game. It's not unusual for this wall to be pincered and come under attack. So this hane and the kaketsugi here, the hanging connection here, this is a sequence that white will be using a lot to make shape because it's almost always forcing. It's not as if it's going to kill the black group, but if white gets to play that hane in the corner, the hane here, it's going to give white an eye in Sente, and it's going to squeeze the black group. Okay, just saying bye.
Yay, puppy dog.
You wanted to get down, I suppose.
Okay.
And so black answers that, and white gets to play this move. So this is a fairly common shape. It's a tetsuji with which white can move into the left side, and so this is okay for white. And so I'm saying that this trade I think it's going to be okay for white. So black answered that ko threat. And so this is white's final ko threat. And when black finally plays here, which threatens to kill the whole white group, white ignores it.
Whoa.
And the whole white group dies. So you can see, just going back to this move, which just said, go ahead and connect up, it made that a good move.
Yeah.
Because now it's connected up and it's dead anyway.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so this is where I started counting the game.
Yeah.
And this actually, for players who question whether they should count the score or not, count the territory. Like when something like this happens and you're pretty sure where the territory is. Sure. It's a good time if you want to count the game. Only in this game, the territory is so big that it's probably pretty difficult. So if we look at the white territory, after white's finished off the lower left corner like this, white has almost 85 points. And so that's the I've sort of marked a boundary for the white territory. And that plus the lower left corner is going to be something close to 85 points. Okay. It's a bit less, so I'm saying almost 85 points. Black has something like 95. And so that's that big chunk of territory in the upper right, where the boundary is pretty clear, isn't it?
Yeah.
And also, and there's some territory in the upper left corner. So there's black's territory is also very clear. So black has 95, white has almost 85. So it's more than 10 points before komi. But we haven't talked about that black stone that's isolated on the lower side.
Mm-hmm.
And so Masters Black is going to do a fairly good job of just making a life for that. But then white's going to get something on the right side. So white has potential to increase. And after all, in game, we're using the Japanese system, I would say it's a 7.5 point komi. So that's a big komi that white is getting. And if it's just 10 points before komi, it's not. White has potential to catch up. So I think it's slightly better for white at this point.
Wow.
And you might notice I've also put an A on the board. And that's a peep there, which has become very small. Like black would like to be able to start an attack on that white wall with a peep at A. But at this point of the game, the area around those 3 white stones is fairly small. So white is just going to ignore that peep and play on the left side. And that makes it fairly difficult for black to make an effective attack on white's wall. And so black starts on the lower side. Like if white plays a move, if black did something like that, let's just make it into a variation. White would probably continue on the left side, actually. So white would actually be getting potentially more territory. Let's change that a little bit and have white play 1 honey. White would be potentially getting more territory than black would be getting on the upper side, because that's just the immediate area around these 3 stones that black is getting. And it's only worth something like 20 points. So white's getting 20 points on the left side too. So it wouldn't really be worth it.
So let me ask though, go back, right to here. So we've done the counting. I think this happens with a lot of players. You've counted and you've figured out what the score is. Mm-hmm. Something like a peep, does look attractive, partly because it looks like Sente, but also, and I think you're going to show us some of the other possibilities. It's relatively easy to read out. Right.
It's relatively easy to read out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like black has basically two game plans that I would consider. And one of them would be to attack the white wall in the upper left first. And ideally, black could chase that group around and trash the whole left side, and then finally save the stone on the lower side.
Right.
And that would probably most often that would be a win for black.
Right.
And so this variation here is one example. This is the example that was easy to make.
Mm-hmm.
The other examples are going to be a bit more complicated. This is the example that was easy to make that shows that it's not really working. And it probably gets a bit more complicated if black starts with, for instance, something like this. But again, as I was talking about before, if white gets to play this, now the point is, if black ignores that, then this is going to be forcing 2, and it's going to be a really small black territory. And if white gets to get some space here, like it already looks like white has 2 eye areas already. And so provided the area around here is sort of left open, it means that white's going to be able to surround that area and make an eye against the wall. And it's going to be relatively easy for white to live in this position. And so a lot of the attack really depends on black being able to play this with Sente, which is not going to happen.
Right.
And so it's really difficult for me to envision a black attack that would severely chase white around enough to give black the initiative to save the lower side stone for also. And so I'm saying I agree with AlphaGo's choice here to start with the lower side. Because once black is alive on the lower side, then white will have to surround the left side. And it will actually make peeps like this potentially more effective.
That makes sense, yeah.
Because the lower side, if white surrounds it, it'll be an added 20 or 30 points. So that's what makes the lower side so important. So actually, so black makes a nice shape here. And black is so solid in the center that whatever white does against the center, like this move, for instance, black's not going to answer in the center. Black can continue playing with the lower side group, which makes it relatively easy for black to make life. Of course, white wants to try to attack, but the object of white's attack is going to be getting a good shape on the left side. And so although we counted that white territory there, you can see that it's already changing in size because black is sort of getting into that white territory. So like I was saying, white has something like 85 points. Let's see, I'd say now white has only about 50 points, something in the vicinity of 50 points in the lower right. And then white has about 20 points in the lower left. And so it's more like 7. So white's territory is decreased a little bit.
Yeah, lost points on that deal.
White lost points, but of course, for the time being, white is sort of attacking. And white is trying to make some territory on the left side. So that's how it's going to work for white. Well, you see, when you play a move like this, this move, when you play a move like this, it's usually counterproductive as far as taking territory is. It's a very strong attack. It's a way for white to attack black and take away black's Eyespace. But when black pushes through like this, you can see that white's territory is, when black pushes through like this, you can see that white's territory is decreasing on the right side. And black sort of has Eyespace. It's not 100% yet, but it's getting there. White plays here. It's not alive yet. And with this exchange, there's, like white would like to be able, let's just make another variation. White would like to be able to play this with Sente, which would make a slight difference with, but black's going to be able to answer that here. Oh, sorry, not that one. Here.
Right.
And white has to answer that somehow on the side. And so that means that black's eventually going to be, connecting up to this black group. And that means that it means potential trouble for white, because that white group is not 100% alive yet. I'm talking about this white group. And also there's the stuff that black can do here, which, for instance, in this case, it would just be alive.
Right.
So it's going to be difficult for white, and it would be a potential huge loss for white to allow black to connect up like this. So I guess that white had to answer directly like this, but this means that black's pretty much alive now. And so black plays away. So black got away with Sente. But you can see there is a territory developing there on the left side of the board.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, if white plays this way now, black's going to sacrifice the 3 stones, and black has a completely live shape. Or actually, black's going to play something a bit more fancy, and we're going to see that in the actual game. But this just displays how black can make eyes if black is an honest player. But and so black is continuing.
Well, we're not being judgmental, though.
Yeah. Okay. White pushes through here, and this gives black an opportunity to get a little bit belligerent. And when AlphaGo plays moves like this, I always have the question: was this kind of like a blunder by white? Because I think white's ahead at this point of the game. My positional judgment says that white should be able to win. It looks like it's maybe a mistake that gives black an opportunity to confuse things and maybe just make the game closer than before. It turns out this is not going to be a reversal. It's not as if black can win the game. But it looks like black is gaining points at least by counterattacking with this move.
Mm-hmm.
So I always have the question, is this a mistake by white? Or is white sort of inviting black to do this because white has already calculated that this is going to be okay for white? And I guess I would originally assume that white was making a mistake, but after a couple of years of looking at AlphaGo's games, I sort of tend to say that AlphaGo probably has it all worked out. And for some reason that I don't really understand, it felt that this variation might be an easier win, despite the fact that it's a half point.
Right.
Yeah, no. I would definitely not be calling this an easier win. Like I think if white had played something just a little bit more conservative, it's difficult, but something a bit more conservative at this point, maybe white would have won by a few more points. But well, we'll see it happen. So black is sliding into the left side here. That's the one territory that white was counting on to catch up in territory. So white attacks here. And again, I was telling you that black can live easily, but black didn't do it that way. Black pushes through here. So I do that variation again. Black can easily live like this. But of course, white's getting that profit there by capturing 3 stones in the center. So that the idea is that white's going to take those 3 stones with Sente. So black pushes through here. And this is actually a weakness. Oh yeah, I did the variation at this point. So black can sacrifice the 3 stones, but black was not quite ready to do that. So black played 1 Atari here. And we have to remember that white will in the upper left, because there's some potential that that white will can be surrounded and captured. And you know that's going to be another close game. Like if we assume that white captures the black group on the lower side, and black captures the white group on the upper side, in the upper left.
Now we got to count again.
It's going to depend on the borderline of that black territory on the upper side. And so there's actually going to be a variation, I think, where I show you a variation where black can win. So white answers that. So this is a position where black has 2 cutting points here. So which side would you cut, Chris? You were asking for a problem, so I'll give you.
Yeah. Well, I like this cut instinctively, but now I'm looking at the other one. But I like this. I like the cut on the left for some reason. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I could tell you why, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, if you cut there, white's going to play here.
Right.
And the idea is that black gets to play a double Atari. But if this happens, now the left side group is in trouble. So actually, this is the wrong answer.
Right. Okay.
But it's actually the wrong answer. You have to read out that sequence for even a pro to judge that. But the point is that if we say black's going to cut white here, when we try to read it out, the assumption we should make is that white's going to capture the cutting stone.
Right.
So like if black cuts this side, white's going to go after that stone and allow black to take on the other side, because white's getting this huge thickness in return. So if black plays this side, white's going to go after that stone. And as far as territory is concerned, this is more profitable for black, because black is sort of trashing the left side in the process.
That's nice.
But now it's really strange. This is the devious thing about master, because now we see that when black is connecting up on the left side anyway, maybe this smart move is gaining a few points because white's getting some territory on trashing, getting rid of some black territory on the side. So maybe it's not such a bad move after all. But it's really hard to judge that kind of thing. So white plays this forcing move in the center, and is going to follow up with this move. So this is just a kind of an endgame sequence.
Yeah.
With which white pushing back the boundary by just 1 space there. But it's more important that white is starting to make some territory in the center. And so this cuts off black, sort of. It didn't really successfully cut black off, but it sort of cuts black off. And so white's threatening that lower side black group again. And black extends. So we have this trade. So you can see black is not really connected. Like if white plays here, black will have to live with the black group. Like if black plays here, black's going to be alive. But actually, black's not going to do that, maybe. Black's probably going to play the Atari here and attack the white group first. So finally, we've come to a variation where the white group in the upper left is capturing that is going to be bigger than white capturing the black group on the lower side. And so if white sacrifices that group, black's going to win. This trade would be a win for black.
Right.
And so white has to scramble for life, and white can live with this sequence. But it's going to be painful, because this white can actually not capture this stone. If white tries to capture it, it's going to be a nakade.
Right.
So white play from inside.
Nice dead shape.
Yeah. And so white ends up saving the whole group. But this, and then white had to add this 1 extra move. And so black got Sente, and also reduced white to 2 points there against the white wall. So this was a failure for white, trying to kill the lower side black group. It just wasn't working. So this was not even a trade. It just allowed black to squeeze white first before living on the side. So white didn't do that. And you'll see that the actual game is much better for white. White answered here to make some territory for that wall. And so white has something like 5 points there for the time being. And so black gets to save the 3 stones. So this is big too. Now white connects. And you can see this is threatening the black group in the center. And yeah, it gets really exciting. Okay.
Wow. Whoa.
So white is setting a sequence where white's going to squeeze black on both sides. Like I didn't do the variation because I didn't want a lot of variations, sub-variations and stuff in the SDF file. But one option for black is to make a life for the lower side group. This is sort of the obvious move, the move that anyone would play. And in turn, white will be able to squeeze this black group. So black has to live with 2 eyes. And this is going to make a big difference to the corner territory too. And so then white can continue, maybe with this move and stuff. White's going to be squeezing the corner, and so it's going to be like something like 7, 8 points. And so it's going to be a lot smaller. You can see that side territory is deteriorated to just 2 points. So it's sort of painful for black.
There's some serious counting going on at this point of the game, right? I mean, it's all points. It's all points.
It's the end game, even though stones are dying sometimes.
Yeah, that's what's confusing because it feels like it's still end game, but actually the counting feels like end game.
Yeah, well, it's confined to this small area of the board, so the rest of the board actually is very easy to count the territories relatively, even though they're pretty big, which makes it hard. But like it's not as if there's a lot of end game moves that you have to calculate into it. And so the territories are relatively easy to count, even for a human pro. For a computer, the computer doesn't forget the numbers. Like a human would get to 92 and they say, oh, well, how big was white's territory? And sometimes you forget, but the computer just has it hardwired, I guess. So it's relatively easy to count the territories. And so all you have to do is calculate what's happening here on the left side. So even a trade like that trade that I was showing you would be relatively easy to figure out. So what am I doing here? So this is the game. In the game, black played the ko first. This is the variation where black would actually play this first and then live, but it's the same story. White gets to squeeze black on the left side and the corner and stuff like that. So I actually already had this variation in. So just to show you what I was doing with that one, it's something like this. And white's really squeezing black on all sides. So actually, looks like I took it to the end of the game.
Wow. You were having fun.
Yeah. So that's the one where black is going to win by about 10 points on the board. So people who are interested can just get a hold of the SDF file. So let's see. Let's back up a little bit. So white made this territory in the center. Black extended. And black saved the 3 stones. So now white starts to try to attack black. And since the upper left white group is alive now, it looks like black just has to submit to that, but black's going to start a ko first. And white accepts the challenge. And so we have this ko starting. And black saying, just go ahead and try to kill me, which white did. And so we have the ko starting here.
Oh my God.
And so this ko started just because black didn't want to give up something like 5 points on the left side, 5 or 6 points, which is pretty painful at this stage of the game.
Yeah, of course.
And so they're fighting the ko. This is pretty straightforward. This move here, it's actually going to lose a point or so, but it creates some extra ko threats for black. Like if white connects against this move, that's just going to be 1 extra ko threat that black gets. But when white plays the game move, white is gaining a point there. And in return, black gets some extra ko threats. So it's kind of a trade-off. So now white just gives up the ko. Gives up the ko now, yeah. So this ended in a trade, a peaceful trade. But black's still not finishing the ko, because black still has ko threats. But finally, black has to connect. So finally, we've come to an endgame situation. And it's really close. Okay. I had a question of why didn't white do this. Like this is the other big endgame move. And I did this endgame. So black's going to push through here and reduce white's territory. This ended up with black. Black has a lead in this variation, actually. So covering on the upper side, this move here, and giving black that forcing sequence on the lower side was not very good for white. So this was a mistake. Black wins by about 10 points before komi. And so white, instead of doing that, white pushes through here. And so actually that's an explanation of why. That was sort of in connection of why, instead of connecting here, when black connected here, black did have the option of squeezing once, like this. But this would be bad compared to the other variation. Like this would allow white to play this big move. And black would not have such a good sequence as this one on the lower side. This is better for black. It's an extra 2 points. And so there's a difference there when black plays the squeeze or doesn't play the squeeze. And it's sort of demonstrated by that variation. So in the game, white pushes through. And at this point, white is winning by, in the territory counting, the Japanese system, white would be winning by 1.5 points.
Okay.
But it's still a quarter of a stone in the Chinese system, which is what AlphaGo is using here. And black makes a mistake, but it actually doesn't change the score. Let's see, what move was it? Black made a mistake later on. Yeah, that's the variation I was showing before. So black, we're coming to the end of the game. And when you come to the end of the game, it's relatively easy to find the mistakes. This is a point where in the actual game, black plays this move, which is just the calculate. It's not as big as moves like this. This makes 2 points for black. If white had played that point, it would have been still a 0.5 point for black. So it's a relatively small move. Whereas these moves are sort of Sente 1 point moves, so they're a bit bigger. So this is what I would call the correct sequence for black. And this is an important point because when black plays here, black doesn't have to add any more stones to that. And this is how the game is going to end, with this being this final move being the smallest move, making this eye as the smallest move on the board, and it comes last. Black's still losing by 1/4 of a stone in the Chinese counting method. But in the Japanese system, it would be a 0.5 point instead of 1.5 points.
It's amazing.
So it's in the Japanese system, it would make a difference. In the Chinese system, it would still be usually called a mistake, but it doesn't happen to make any difference to the result. So this is where the game ends, and black has to answer at A. Otherwise, white would throw in there. And white had chances to throw in there earlier, like with white's final move, which would have been better for white, but it doesn't care because white's winning anyway.
Right.
White's winning by 1/4 of a stone. That's good enough for AlphaGo.
It's plenty, right? It's all it needs.
Yeah.
It's all it needs. So this has been just a fascinating game because I don't remember seeing, there's been some exciting and dramatic stuff, but this horse trading that goes on, right, frankly, when I thought things were sort of settling down, and then it starts up all over again. It's just fascinating.
Well, this kind of stuff, it's not at the level of some of the self-played games where they get it really crazy towards the end of the game or in the middle game. And this is at a level that can actually happen in human games too, where you know the game is really close and actually just refusing to back down on and that 1 point or that couple of points is sometimes more important than worrying about the life of your groups.
Right.
So some players will be fighting a ko when they could have lived without unconditionally, or all that kind of stuff. This kind of stuff that was happening on the left half of the board towards the end is similar to Endgame, a fighting Endgame and a human game also.
And
it's
all,
pretty familiar. Yeah.
No, and also demonstrating there's just amazing flexibility. Go this way, go that way. Give away part here. Or maybe you can have the whole group. It's almost like a series of riddles, right?
Right. Well, the difference really between AlphaGo and the human players would be that while human players are trying to do the same things, human players generally at that point of the game they're in overtime and don't have time to completely calculate it. Whereas AlphaGo, looking at the game afterwards, I can't find any mistakes, which is different from what it would be in human games, where you would usually find mistakes.
Right. And you looked.
I looked. I tried to find the mistakes.
Well, once again, Michael, wonderful analysis, and as I know from the comments, and keep those coming, folks. We do read them and appreciate them. But special appreciation to you, Michael. I know you love it. I know you just really get into it. And thanks for all the variations this time. Just wonderful stuff. Of course, the SGF file is there, so folks are going to check that out. And before we take off, just want to give another big thanks to all of our AGA members who, of course, make videos like this possible. And if you'd like to support this content as well, please consider joining the American Go Association at usgo.org. And we'll see you all next week.